Hey, good morning, everybody. Chief Meteorologist Brad Panovich here. We've got the risk for severe storms today. Now, not everybody is going to see severe storms. They will be scattered to isolated, but the ones that get going, especially the further north you go today, those could potentially be severe. For that reason, today's a day we want you to stay weather aware, especially after 4 o'clock, and I would say really into the evening hours. We'll talk more about the timing here in a minute, but here's the severe weather outlook for today. You could see almost our entire region is either under a higher risk, which is up here in the northern mountains, up into Kentucky, eastern Tennessee, southwest Virginia, medium risk for the Piedmont, and then the lower Piedmont down into the Midlands, kind of a lower risk. Now, the overall risk is really going to be about the risk for winds today. I'm going to move my head here out of the way. You can see the wind risk here on the right shows almost everybody has at least a low, medium, or high risk of straight line winds. The hail risk definitely concentrated in northern mountains, and the tornado risk definitely to the north. So today's kind of an interesting setup where the tornado risk will definitely be further to the north. And just to reiterate that, this is the overall risk today. Straight line winds are our highest risk today, followed probably by flooding and then hail and tornadoes. Though there is a tornado risk, it's going to be isolated. And I'll kind of talk about that coming up here in a minute. Let's get right to the map and show you what's going on. You can see that stalled front. I talked about this yesterday. That front is right in here. It's drifting to the north. And what's happening is warm, humid air is surging in below this front. And this is bringing in the instability. This is the fuel for thunderstorms, hot, humid air at the surface. Now, the fuel's one thing. You need a trigger. That trigger is going to be this cold front and this low pressure system, which is back here. This is going to be pushing east. So anywhere along this boundary and the track of the low is where we're going to have the highest risk for tornadoes or really severe weather. Then the cold front comes through and we'll likely see one last blast of probably some pretty good storms. So here's the risk overall. You could see again, kind of that area in red. It's right where that low pressure is. So think of the Kentucky-Tennessee border and then the North Carolina-Virginia border. That's the area of greatest concern today. The probability of tornadoes, 2% in green, that's kind of mustard shade. That's about a 5%. So you kind of get the idea. The wind threat, though, overall, much bigger risk. You see almost the entire area will be impacted by those wind risks. So let's get into that futurecast. All right, let's dive right into the futurecast. This is 11 a.m. We'll go into the afternoon hours. So stop us at 3 o'clock. There could be some storms that develop along the front, north of the Greensboro area, up near Raleigh, Danville area. They got to watch those. Those are the ones that tracking along the front that definitely potentially could be severe. Then we get into 5 p.m. So for the southern Piedmont and the western Carolinas, you kind of see this arc of storms developing. This is what we need to watch. These storms like this, if they're isolated in nature, some of these could have some rotation in it, but they could form more of a bowing segment and produce wind. But that's still a threat we're going to have to watch. And notice that they're really isolated initially. So it's 6 o'clock at this point. So most of the day has been dry. So don't think this is a complete washout. It's really going to be a short time period this evening where we see a wave of storms around 6, maybe 7 o'clock right here. And then look at the main line. This is along the main cold front back to the west. That's the second line that's coming in. So that first line moves through. Got to watch it for severity. And then look at this squall line. This is 10 o'clock tonight. So this thing is humming along. 11 o'clock loses some of the daytime heating. So that might help us out here. But there's clearly going to be 2 waves of storms. I'll loop it again. That first wave of more isolated thunderstorms, which always potentially could be severe. And then that next line, which comes in later tonight and likely will be weaker, especially as it gets later into the evening. But initially, some strong winds. Or look at the time. By midnight, we're losing the daytime heating, so it starts to weaken. But definitely these 2 waves right there around, I'd say 5, 6, 7 o'clock. And then that next wave comes in after 10 o'clock. And that one should be weaker. Let's look at some of the parameters. Tornado parameter here. You could see as we go into the afternoon, into the evening, again, not off the charts, but notice the heightened area up here near the Virginia, North Carolina border. Again, these are the areas up in here where we're watching that potential for some rotating storms. And speaking of rotating storms, we can look at the rotation tracks overall, and I'll kind of plot them out here. I'll be able to grab a different pen here so it's easier to see. But you can see up in here in parts of Kentucky, West Virginia, Virginia, that's where we have the most tracks. Down here to the south, there's not as many. Doesn't mean this one coming in here couldn't be, or here, but they're pretty weak. So you get the idea. When you look at these, you can't really say that's exactly where there's going to be a rotating storm. You look for the number and kind of the general area, and you get the idea. That's why there's that higher risk near the Virginia, North Carolina border. So it's pretty straightforward as we get into the afternoon hours. that we're going to see some strong storms come in probably after 4 o'clock. And I really think the highlight here is going to be in the evening hours right here, this time frame between, I'd say, let's say 6 o'clock and 10 p.m. probably to me is the time frame we need to watch for severe storms. So it's definitely a day we want you to stay weather aware, because these lines of storms coming in, and I'll loop this a couple more times, kind of shows you wave number 1 right here, and then wave number 2 coming in later tonight. So we'll keep you up to date. Just make sure the phone is charged. If you hear an alert go off, today is kind of a different day. These storms are likely going to be severe if they can get going. So be prepared. We could see a watch issued, especially north of Interstate 40. I think there likely could be a tornado watch there. To the south doesn't mean we couldn't see other counties added. And certainly we're going to see some warnings. Damaging wind is primary threat number 1, followed by hail and flooding, and then tornadoes. Tornadoes, I do think we could see 1 or 2. They're going to be incredibly isolated, but if they're going to happen, look for those areas from I-40 north. Those are the threat areas today. Have a great day. I will post updates throughout the afternoon and likely have another vlog at some point this afternoon.